Director of Research at the Auwal Socio-Economic Research Institute, Angelo Fick, joins us now for more. Angelo, very good evening to you. It's been an ongoing conversation. In fact, at some point, some were saying that the inability to take any move, even suspension, is a failure of the ANC and their will to renew themselves. So this action of suspending him and not expelling him, even though I understand it's a process, what do you think? Does one speak more of the seriousness of where the ANC stands or not, or is it all a moot point?
So I think there are three things going on, SABC, and the first one would be the position that Jacob Zuma has had in the African National Congress, his behavior while he was president at the African National Congress, and his behavior since Valentine's Day 2018, when he ceased to be president of the country and a member of the African National Congress as a former president. And there, I think the party has had a very long time in which to gauge what they're likely to hear from him. And so, for some of us, his latest remarks on the MK party have not been much of a surprise. The second issue that the party has is that this is a moment of great, shall we say, stress in an organization. For a former president of the party, the person who had been president of the party just before the current incumbent, has now been suspended from the party for precisely, as the current president points out, claiming to be not just a supporter of another party, but that he supposedly maintained his membership of the ANC, but wants to canvass for, vote for another party and encourage other people to vote for that party. And the ANC's constitution is very clear that unless the organization is inside the tripartite alliance, unless the organization is a partner of the ANC, members may not belong to other parties. And it would be odd for somebody to say they're a member of one party and actively campaign for a different party, even in the current flux we have in South Africa. And the third issue is, what does this say about the state of the African National Congress? And to me, it seems as if it's not just in other aspects in the world we're moving back to the 1930s, but for the African National Congress, its organizational state seems to recall, even though it has government power and is likely to retain that after the 2024 election, it feels like this is the 1930s again for the ANC, riven with faction fights, declining support, declining membership, and some kind of revival, one imagines, of the kind that, was engendered under Zuma when he was president in the 1940s, might be needed urgently if the ANC is to survive as a significant organization into the 2030s.
So let's look at declining support for the ANC, Angelo. Just during the 2016 local government election, there was a poll that suggested that Jacob Zuma as an individual cost the ANC millions of votes because he repelled core ANC supporters. Now, I'm just wondering, at this stage, how do you judge the impact scale of Jacob Zuma within the party and Jacob Zuma outside of the party?
So one would have to think of the ANC's notion of collective responsibility. They would also have to look at what happened to the ANC organizationally during his tenure as president and all of the officials who were there in the NEC with him for his 2 terms as ANC president. In January 8th statement after January 8th statement, and in both of his statements as party president at the policy conferences, Mr. Zuma indicated and spoke about declining branch numbers, and who can forget that, Gallagher estate moment at which the president had read out what he saw as declining ANC membership numbers, and his then Deputy Secretary General, Jesse Duarte, went around on a press tour indicating that the president had been reading off numbers that were out of date. And so the concern is not just with declining numbers in the ANC that goes back to 2015, but also with the concern around branch organization, branch legitimacy, and some problems with managing branches, which also goes back to 2014, 2015. I don't think that has been resolved nationally to the satisfaction of the organization. So it's not just that Jacob Zuma as a man may have alienated people from supporting the party. The organization, when he was president, underwent a series of problems that I don't think have been addressed in the post-Zuma years, and that's partly because the way in which Mr. Ramaphosa came to the presidency in his first term was in a very divided party. The ANC under his second term is less divided, but there seems to be an absence of people from KwaZulu-Natal in the top 6 officials, and who can forget what happened at the 2022 conference with all those KwaZulu-Natal delegates leaving seemingly early before the conference was finished, and some of the results of the conference had to be announced as late as January of 2023. So my sense is the party speaks of renewal, but it isn't always clear that it's able to do that renewal under the current circumstances, and there does seem to be other problems the party faces with both its 2 top officials facing all sorts of allegations and disciplinary issues, whether it's Kala or Mr. Ramaphosa or Mr. Mashatile's sort of financial dealings and these relationships with specific people in Gauteng and the sort of money spent by family members of his while he is deputy president of both the party and the country. So my sense is the ANC does have an uphill battle internally, but whether that works out as the losses one imagined 2 years ago for the ANC is a different story, given that the South African political landscape is also made up of other parties and what they've been doing.
So Angela, if I'm there in that booth and I'm deciding who to vote, juxtaposing brand ANC under the leadership of Cyril Ramaphosa and brand Jacob Zuma. So I'd like to start with Jacob Zuma, who is known as a man of the people, but his critics would say even when the ANC was with its alliance partners fighting over the neoliberal policies, so-called of Thabo Mbeki, that he was one of the leaders that implemented that. So looking at Cyril Ramaphosa, Jacob Zuma says we're forming the AMK because Cyril Ramaphosa has failed to implement pro-poor policies. So what sticks if you're to judge these two on what I've just laid out?
Well, firstly, I suspect that Mr. Zuma's sketch of what the reasons for his establishment or support for the MK party may not actually be the only thing to bear in mind here. Let's not forget that Mr. Zuma very, very carefully maneuvered himself behind people who were opposing Mr. Ramaphosa's first as well as second term and failed to get the majority of the party to vote for those candidates. And Mr. Ramaphosa won narrowly in the first election in 2017 and slightly more, I wouldn't say resoundingly, but more clearly in the 2022 election. The first problem for any person who is a supporter of the ANC will be whether or not they're going to get up and vote in the 2024 election, regardless of who the candidate is going to be, unless the party gets its house in order. And so turnout is going to be a major issue. For those who are critical of the Ramaphosa years, there will be some people who look back to the Zuma years and see those as the moment in which they will have done better. And for many other people, the disappointment of the Ramaphosa years may be that it didn't fulfill all of its promise of what used to be called a new dawn, of overturning the problems of the Zuma era, among others, the allegations of corruption, the concerns around corruption and patronage, as well as money politics in the party and the spreading of that into the state. And for many people, the kind of coalition that the party has gone into in local government in places like Johannesburg, Nelson Mandela Bay, seem to be very, very odd for their politics. And so I think older traditional believers in the African National Congress who may have felt disaffected alienated from the party under Mr. Zuma, thought there may be in a moment under Mr. Ramaphosa, and the question will be in 2024, given the ANC's decline under Mr. Ramaphosa's first administration in the 2019 elections, whether or not they turn out in 2024.
Angelo, just a quick and brief one. If we are then to stick with the belief of collective leadership of the ANC, and there's this clarion call from the electorate of a change, has the opposition been able to, make good of the fertile situation for change, the Democratic Alliance, EFF, IFF? Have they been able to take advantage of that with the campaign messaging they're doing right now?
So that has been the problem, I think, for opposition parties, that they will have to have asked themselves both in 2014, in 2019, and again in 2024, if the electorate does not turn out for them in large numbers, what is it that they're doing that even with the ANC in the state it has been in for more than a decade, they haven't been able to get those. And I suspect that the official opposition has not done nearly enough, and there are too many gaffes. For example, over the weekend, Mr. Steenhuisen's gaffe in critique that is absolutely necessary, Mr. Lesufi's use of crime wardens, but to couch it in those specific classed and deeply offensive terms around drunken people and shebeens, wearing one particular store associated with working class people, that I think speaks to a tone deafness about where the majority of South Africans are and who they are and why one should appeal to them to vote for them. And my sense is that with a majority youth population so disaffected, even the second largest opposition party, the Economic Freedom Fighters, has to work much harder to get those young people to vote for them. Okay. And whether they do so or not is going to be tested in the 24 elections.
Angelo, thank you so much for your time and sharing your thoughts with us. Director of Research at the Auwal Socio-Economic Research Institute, Angelo Fick, just sharing his thoughts around the latest following the outcome of that ANC-NEC meeting.